Welcome to the Two Chicks with Hiking Sticks podcast. We cover all things natural, cultural, and historical in the world around us. Sit back and enjoy our sometimes snarky, often funny, and never dull podcast.
I did a double clap.
I missed it because I was trying to catch you. Oh well.
Well, here we are. Here we are, two chicks with hiking sticks.
Here we are.
I am Susan.
I'm Monica.
And we cover the natural, historical, and cultural world around us.
All the fascinating things that you could think about, we discuss it.
Maybe not every fascinating thing you could think of.
Sasquatch is fascinating.
He has his moments, I'll tell you that. Sometimes he appears.
Sometimes he does.
Sometimes he walks right in between us. So, our job is to cover things that maybe you don't normally think about.
Or don't know about.
And I'll be honest with you, when I started my trek to go see MPS sites, this place, never heard of in my entire life.
Oh, then I'm sure I definitely never heard of it.
I'm sure you haven't. And I am sure most of our listeners have not. But please, continue to listen because it is such an important part in our history. So what we're going to cover today is Pullman National Historic Park. When you think of the word Pullman, what do you think of?
Trains.
Very good.
Well, because the Pullman cars were the ones that had, well, there were Pullman that would come and pull the beds down, I think. Isn't that what Pullmans were?
I don't know about that, but okay.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's what I seem to remember reading somewhere, but I don't know if they did other stuff. But I know it was trains. I know it had something to do with trains and cars.
Yes.
The train cars.
Yes. You are spot on. Now, don't turn away yet. It's not just about train cars. This is about an entire area that was designed, created, worked as a community and business in a way that we have never seen before.
Prior to when it started, you mean?
Since then,
because
really.
I think Pullman also made elevators.
Maybe.
But anyway, sorry.
This is more about the Pullman cars,
Mm-hmm.
as you said, and they were luxury cars.
Yes, I
back
remember
in the
that,
day.
right.
But the significance of it is more about this town.
Okay.
So let me give you a little backstory here real quick about how this was even established. So it is located in Chicago, Illinois. And in fact, I think it is like one of the only NPS sites in Illinois.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, and it didn't become a site, like a protected national park site, until 2015 under Barack Obama.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which isn't surprising since he's basically in Chicago, right?
Right.
This
Right.
is an area outside of Chicago. But it is I would say amazing or fascinating place because this is a company town that was known for the manufacturing of luxury railroad sleeping cars.
Right.
So the key thing about it is that this man, George Pullman,
Mm-hmm.
so he was a guy, he was a man, he created this town where you worked, you played, you slept. You did everything in this town. And he did that. He created this environment so that the workers were all right there, easy. We were all
Right.
we all worked here. We all lived here. We socialized here. We were readily accessible for the business. How does that make you feel?
It makes me, and I don't want to digress from this, but it reminds me of Quarrytown here in San Antonio.
No sabi.
Okay. I will, remind me, we'll talk about that at the end, but
Okay.
Quarrytown had some negative and positive connotations to it.
Yeah. So this is one of those ones that, well, the site itself was like dated back to like the late 1800s.
Okay.
Like when it was a business. Because, you have to think back when we had railroads,
Mm-hmm.
right? Number one, we had to have railroads. And then you had luxury cars of these railroads.
Right.
On these trains. So that people, could basically ride in comfort.
Yes.
And at this location where like the visitor center is, they have a really nice kind of replica of what these cars were like. And so you get a feel for what the luxury was at the time, where these things were manufactured and built and then put on trains and, attached, and then people use them or what have you. It is also an UNESCO site.
Really? Okay.
Because this whole area is just kind of like the town itself. And I will show a map of this, because this is what is important about it, is how this whole community is mapped out in a way that really you signed on to be a part of this world, basically. And you think about it in today's context, I can't see this ever happening.
Right.
Because, like you said, there's good and bad to it, right?
Yeah.
So the good is that, hey, everything is right here. I live, breathe, eat, socialize, everything with all these people around me, and we have a really solid community. But the bad of it is that then the people who are designing it are also monitoring everything that you're doing.
Right. Yeah.
So it's the yin and yang. So it sits on the south side of Chicago. So it's not really a part of Chicago. I mean, so when I went to it, I was never really in Chicago, but it's on the south side of Chicago. Now, back in the day, it was considered Chicago, though. So, I mean, it's all where we put our city epicenter, I suppose. But it is a very residential area, and it's basically row houses and trees, and it's a community. It's like a regular community that's established out there. Now, the origin of the town. So let's talk a little bit about that, because, again, this town was interesting because you also had like a class system, and it was designated. You knew when you were walking by these houses what status level you were.
Sure. Yeah.
So, of course, the nice ones made of brick and what have you were probably, like the executives maybe of the company, versus the worker bee that was in like, very basic kinds of houses.
Shotgun houses or something.
But the thing that was interesting about this, though, is that the housing that was built for this community, for the workers there, was some of the best housing in terms of it had like plumbing, like toilet, like plumbing, versus like you still had lots of people in Chicago proper that were still using outhouses.
Right.
So it was very ahead of its time and considered to be somewhat luxury for worker bees.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So, but you can imagine how, like, as workers, I was getting this type of, quote, luxury, so I felt good about myself and felt good about, doing what I needed to do for the company, right? So it's almost, we talk about like a brainwashing kind of thing, right?
Yes.
You're fed this, you're given these good things, right?
Yes.
But really, when you peel that back in today's lens and go, you were still paying fees to go to, say, the library or to see entertainment, whatever. And that money was just being funneled back into the people who were paying for it. So it's like, who was really getting the benefit?
Right. Yeah.
It just...
That reminds me of something I saw recently regarding medical insurance. And Aetna, I think, and CVS, which Aetna owns CVS, and then CVS owns some kind of medical insurance group. So you use this medical insurance, which is sends you to CVS to get the meds, and Aetna is the one that owns everything, and so it's like a big revolving thing of money. It never leaves. It never leaves.
Exactly. It stays in its own ecosystem, which is exactly what this was.
Yeah.
It stays in its own ecosystem, which the significance of what happened here, though, because, let's say half of the people that worked in this factory area were immigrants. They weren't like native born. I can't say Native Americans because they weren't Native Americans.
Right.
They were born in America.
Right. U.S. citizens.
Yeah, they weren't. Well, they maybe had become U.S. citizens.
Right.
But 50% of the people really were like, Irish, Dutch, whatever, that had come over looking for jobs.
Sure.
And then a lot of African Americans worked here in this factory, which is kind of cool when you think about the diversity of the neighborhood.
Right.
Right.
That is cool.
And this almost goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is that the diversity that you had, did they recognize that diversity? Now, there was a class system, to be sure, and the difference in the housing, But did I recognize I was working with, Irish, Dutch, or, African Americans versus white people or whatever?
Right.
Did that make a difference? I don't know. But it's just when you think about this closed system in a way, right? Because if you lived here, you knew you were working there at this place.
Right.
I don't know. I just found that fascinating. But anyhow, just the things I think that are fascinating.
But not alcohol. just tea, coffee, whatever.
Whatever your liquid is of choice. Now, one of the
strong tea.
So one of the things that I think is important here is that the workers, there was a strike or a walk-off. They walked off the job because...
Really?
Yeah, because the company cut the wages by, like, say, 25% for whatever reasons they needed to cut wages.
That's big.
But they didn't cut the cost of your rent or your housing.
Oh.
They didn't cut any of that.
Yeah.
And they're like, but you're making me live here, and you're not cutting my costs to have to pay to live here, but you just chopped my earnings.
Right.
Right? Like, something ain't right here. So they walked off the job, right? So basically, and you would say it was almost like a strike, right? Well, this is where it comes into play. This is what I thought was really cool, because again, I didn't know this about, they walk off the job, and then no work is obviously being done, right? And so then eventually the courts get involved and the government gets involved. And this is where the government steps in and ends the strike for the good of the American people in general, because they said not having the trains running, because behind Pullman factory here, the railroad got involved and said, yeah, you can't be doing this to your workers. And so then that ceased operations for railroads. The government's like, oh, no, you cannot do that because we need the mail to go. We need, stuff to move on railways.
Right.
That's how government intervention started in these strikes.
So did the government side on the for the worker?
No.
Oh, shocked.
Yeah, right.
Shocked.
So,
I'm shocked.
yeah, so basically the workers had to go back to work and still.
Jeez.
Yeah. But the fascinating part I thought was that the government, this is the precedent that happened that allowed government to get involved in strikes for the welfare of the American people. I'll use that welfare of the American people in quotes, to make sure goods and services would continue. So you think about like...
For the general American people, but not the American people working there.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Okay.
But you think about it like, I always think of like the airline, who are the people in the tower?
The air control. Yes, thank you. Yes.
Like two words sounds like.
Okay.
But it's just like, we can't allow them not to exist, right? So the government steps in and does what they have to do to make sure people are there.
Right.
And even though you don't get paid.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I would be bitter.
Well, yeah. I mean, eventually, the way of the railway kind of went to the side, right? So eventually, people didn't need to have luxury cars because they had their own cars.
True
so
that.
Travel started to change.
Yes.
And so it no longer became about railroads. And so eventually that all went away. But as that went away, it's like those deep, dark secrets of living in this community. While it had a great idea, the way that it was being used was not so great. It became more controlling. But I'll say this, and I remember this. I used to work at a place in another city, and I remember there was where the building was. It was next to a AAA ball field, like their AAA team played in this ball field, and it was a nice old place. But eventually, the AAA team moved to another field, and so this baseball field still sat there. And one April Fool's, somebody wrote in our newsletter, there was like a whole article about they were going to get rid of the ball field and create condos so that workers could just live in the condos. Like, it was right in our back door. It was great. Work in the and I remember how excited we all got. I mean, because, back in that day, I was working, 6 days a week all the time because it's just, I loved going in on Saturdays and getting caught up on work. And I just really loved working. And I loved working where I was working. And so the thought of having condos like right there attached to our property like was exciting to me. And I was so disappointed that it was an April Fool's joke.
Well, when Google first became like a household name and they were talking about the campus and you could eat there are cafeterias there and childcare, and I was like, that's kind of like a Nirvana place, you know? But then I remembered that I worked for a company, which, thank God I've worked for many, so you can't pinpoint this one. But the owner of the company would bring in food, right? Oh, I brought y'all this for lunch, brought y'all that for lunch. Because eventually I figured out they didn't like us to leave for lunch.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, and so I was like, I'm taking my own lunch hour, thank you. Even if I had to drag my butt to the park down the street and just sit there and twiddle my thumbs.
It was my time.
It was my time for that whole hour. Yeah, and so that's what that reminds me of.
What's interesting is that at the time, at that stage of my life, I was very excited about that opportunity, and to know that the people I was working with were all next door to me and I could be in this condo, whatever. And then I wouldn't have to drive. I mean, I only lived like 5 miles from work at the time, so it wasn't like I was driving very far, but then I could just walk over. I was so disappointed.
I could work 7 days a week. This is amazing.
I really loved my job. I loved working. And then I was so disappointed when it wasn't real. But it made me think of, I remember at one of the places that I worked, somebody used to call us like the Stepford Wives, that we would all kind of go through turnstiles and do our jobs. And then, it was like brainwashed. We all had our assigned things to do. And then we all walk out, punch out, and go. And I always thought that was just, I didn't understand that. But then as I grew up, I really started to understand that more.
Yeah.
And like when you think about this Pullman site and what these workers went through and how they were treated and this neighborhood that was created, while on the one hand there were some really positive things to it and there really was a sense of community, there were a lot of downsides to it because they did control the purse strings and they controlled everything. They monitored everything that you did everywhere that you went.
It sounds ideal initially. I remember I worked in the field of developmental disabilities, and when group homes first started, one of the models was that you had a live-in house manager. Well, I mean, it all sounds great. The house manager's getting to live there for free, and they're eating with the guys, and and they're off on weekends. But if you've got your bedroom in there or your apartment there in the garage, and there's an issue with the staff, well, who's going to cover if the staff calls in? Whose door are they going to knock on when they have a question?
That's right.
So it becomes intertwined, and you never ever get to leave.
It really becomes a blurring of the lines.
Yes.
And again, good and bad. I mean, I guess when I was naive, it all seemed good. But as I got older and more cynical. When I was an underwriter. I know. When I became an underwriter, I became very cynical. I didn't believe anybody's story about anything. But anyhow, that's another whole other thing. But anyhow. But this location is because of its significance as a community, and it's a town that you can walk around. So they really behoove you to get out. Now, it was a dry town. So Pullman, George Pullman, no alcohol, except they had a Hotel Florence. It was the only place that served alcohol, but no workers could go.
Oh,
so it was only for visiting people.
That's so wrong.
That you could go get your whiskey.
So wrong.
What is wrong? It's like, we're going to treat the people who visit and want to marvel at this site differently.
Better.
Yeah, better than the people who live here.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. But anyhow, so the location, the layout of the community, again, I will have posted a picture at some point in here about what that community looked like, was key. But then the second key thing was about how they went on strike. The government then intervened, and the workers ended up losing still.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would like to see that, and I love Chicago anyway, so
Yeah, I learned quickly in Chicago traveling there, be careful with your GPS, because sometimes you're under the water.
Oh.
And it's not tracking you where you think you're being tracked. I got lost many a time down in those tunnels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going back to this real quick, in Quarrytown in San Antonio, do you know where the Quarry Village is, the Quarry Mall?
I know, yeah, the Quarry.
Okay, the Quarry
Off of
Mall, where
Pasadena.
the Quarry Mall is, used to be Quarry Village. Many, probably back, this was, I think, I want to say it was back in the 30s and 40s. So it was very similar. They needed workers to work at the quarry, so they built basically a village there. And the people that worked there, most of them Hispanic, got to live there, schooled. The children were schooled there.
Wow.
Okay? Now, it all sounds idyllic because, and there are people that will tell you it was good for us because we were able to work at jobs where we got paid fairly well. We had an opportunity for promotion. You know, they could become management, and our kids can go to school here. But that's because they didn't want to integrate Hispanic kids into the school district, and that school district at that time was, and still is, I believe,
we'll just
was
give you your
Alamo
own little
Heights.
village.
Right.
Oh,
Yes. Okay. And for those of you that don't live here, Alamo Heights is its own city, but it's a very well-to-do city.
It's got
So,
monies.
yes. So of course they didn't want to integrate all these little Hispanic children into Alamo Heights, and so there was a pocket there in Alamo Heights, basically, of quarry workers that were living there. You just look it up sometime.
I had no idea.
I had no idea either. I happened to read an article about it, and I think it was my mom that told me to read the article many years ago, and I had no idea that had happened here. And then later, one of the parents of one of my clients, she was a teacher's aide at that time, and she was one of the instrumental parents and teachers to kind of try to get integration going.
Wow.
At that time. But yeah, it happened here, something very similar, yeah.
I wonder, maybe back in the day, granted this was like late 1800s, and then yours was a few decades ago.
Yeah.
If maybe it just wasn't, maybe it was, I don't know, just not as overt. I'm trying to think about now, today. Today we're still being monitored by all sorts of stuff, right? Because we have all of our digitals and things like that. Maybe it's not as overt today as it was back in the day, but maybe we didn't realize back in the day it was not overt, but it was overt.
I see positives and negatives to it, and I remember this was many years ago, probably well over 15, 20 years ago. There was a spot on 60 Minutes, and they talked about this young woman who wanted to take this old hotel that was derelict and run down. She wanted to turn it into a not-for-profit for young people that were trying to be actors or in the profession where they
Creative arts.
Right, creative arts, but they were working as waiters and waitresses and doing, blue collar jobs and couldn't afford to live in a good place. And she also had this vision of combining that with people that were homeless and needed homes and were rehabilitating. So she got a grant, and she was able to get a grant. And what ended up happening was she made this building. It was residential. On the top were counselors' offices and people. And then in the bottom were businesses that agreed to come in and work. And I think Ben and Jerry's was one. So the people that were like rehabilitating were getting trained on working jobs. They worked there. They saw their counselors there. They lived there. And then it was right, and it was mixed with these young workers that were trying to be actors or actresses or whatever and couldn't afford better places, so it was subsidized. Yeah. Which sounds really great,
it does.
Right? It sounds awesome. But is it? I don't know. I always thought, wow, that's a great medium. We should do more things like that. But then you think,
I know.
I don't know. Is that smart? Is that good? Do you get someone and once they've reached a certain criteria, kick them out? You're done. You've learned everything you can learn, and you are rehabilitated to get the hell out.
Well, but yeah, it's like, you age out or,
Right,
yeah,
right.
I mean, you have to leave room for other people to come in.
Right. But, it just kind of reminds me, all these things sort of kind of remind me, we do things for the good.
Altruistically.
Right. But is it good? And does it end up being good all the time? I don't know.
Well,
I don't
because
know.
at some point, and this is, I mean, we could go into a long thing, because at some point you're making money at it, and you
Right.
need to continue to make money at it.
Right.
So then you need more things in order to make the money at it.
Right.
That usually.
And this was a
means-
not-for-profit, I think, but still,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's good and bad on both sides of it.
Yeah. So if you like information or like to, learn more about these types of places like Pullman National Historic Park, this is our job, is to pique your interest a little bit,
Yeah.
right? So that way you look into it more to really understand this history of the country that we live in, and understand the things that you may have never been privy to because it just never came across in a
Right,
history
right.
book or whatever. And even in our local town that I didn't even know about this happening, about the Quarry Village, I think it's helpful.
It is. And, I'm not a history person. You all know that.
We know
If
that.
you've been watching this podcast, you know that history is not my gig.
We know that.
But this is interesting, and I find this fascinating, and but, I would want to know more about that. And as a matter of fact, when we get out of here, I'm going to look it up, and I'm going to read a little bit more about it, because I do think it's interesting, and it has piqued my interest, and I love the parallels.
With today.
With today, yes, exactly.
And it's how things have morphed, but yet they're still kind of the
They're
same.
still kind of the same. That's exactly right.
Yep.
Exactly right.
So if you've liked this episode, please make sure that you like us and subscribe to us. And be sure you follow along on Facebook or on YouTube. We
Yes.
appreciate it.
Speaking of following along, as of today, we are number 3, Two Chicks with Hiking Sticks, number 3 in the best 30 outdoor women podcasts in the U.S. Yay!
Hey.
And if you'd like to know more about some of these rankings and some of the better podcasts in different areas, we're going to leave a link here to millionpodcast.com.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
And we appreciate your support in getting us to number 3. So thank you.
Give us a like.
Yeah.
We got merch.
We got merch.
You can buy us a coffee. You can share our stuff. That sharing is really the best.
Yeah, sharing is the best to get the word out there.
And subscribing.
Just to let people know about these places that are all around us.
It's free for you to subscribe.
Yes.
Nobody's going to bother you. Nobody's going to send you emails. If you do want a notification, then you click
Ring
on
the
the little
bell.
You ring the bell. But otherwise, it's all free.
It is all free. So please join us every week as we put these out for you. And I guess that's all I have, Monica.
That's all I got.
All right. Well, remember to
Hike your
own
hike.
And we'll see y'all later.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, and remember to follow our podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to Two Chicks with Hiking Sticks on YouTube, where you also get to see our lovely faces, pictures, and videos of our journey.